Hey guys, how's it going? Pat here, and in today's video we're going to be discussing the engine setup in the car, its history, all the way from the original 350 that it had back in the day when I first got it to the 463 that's in it right now. So when I originally got the car, which I believe was around 2011, 2012, had a pretty tired 350 in it. It's 350 2-barrel car with a TH350 behind it. And being a kid in middle school, I didn't exactly have the money to go and do a full engine rebuild, and I wasn't even really sure what I wanted to do with the car at the time. So my dad and I decided to look on Craigslist, see what we could find an engine to just put in the car to get it running, because while the 350 ran, it was making some strange noises. You could definitely tell it was pretty tired, and it needed some new life breathed into it, which I didn't have the means to do at the time. So searching Craigslist, there was actually a guy up in New York who had a 65 Cutlass he was making a drag car out of. He was putting a Chevy big block in it. So he took the original 330 out of it and just listed it for sale. So we took a gamble. I think we paid about $400 for the engine, complete. Didn't really know what was going on with it. It supposedly ran, but we couldn't hear it run because it was out of the car. So we brought it back in here, threw it in, ran it with a 204R for a few years, and the engine actually ended up being great. It was very reliable. We had that in the car for probably 3 years or so. No issues, ran awesome. We went through, quickly looked over everything when we got it, put new gaskets in it, and ended up being pretty clean. It was a great little engine, but around senior year of high school, I decided I wanted to put a little more power in the car, and I guess the logical progression from going from a little small block was to go up to a big block and to just go all the way with the 455. So that brings us to this engine, which I was looking on Craigslist, similar to the way I found the 330, and I found this up in Mass. It was just listed as a 71 Olds 455. There wasn't really any description on it, so I decided to take a chance, and I drove up there and went and looked at it, and it was just sitting under a guy's workbench in a barn behind his house. It was all covered in stuff, so I dug it out, started looking into it a little bit, ended up finding out it was out of a 71 442 4-speed car. The car was long gone, but the engine was there and together, even though it needed a full rebuild. So I decided to buy it, bring it home. Didn't really have any plans for it, but I just wanted to have a good core to start with. And so I think the engine sat for about a year. Slowly started saving up money and picking up parts. And around, I think, spring of 2016, we decided to do a full rebuild on it. So we sent off to a local machine shop here in Connecticut called Piston Automotive. And they took care of all of the machine work. As far as assembling the engine, we did all of that back here. But they boarded out 30 thousandths over, new cam bearings, new main bearings, new rod bearings, things like that. We reused the factory crank and rods. That was about it. So the original setup on the 461, once we got it back, was original crank, original rods, SRP flat top pistons that were 30 thousandths over. Went with the Crane hydraulic flat tappet cam. It's part number 80661, I believe. Lift is 536, 560, and then duration of 50 is 238, 248. So it's pretty aggressive cam in the Crane lineup. I don't think it was their most aggressive one, but it's one of the most aggressive ones. Intake is Edelbrock Performer RPM air gap, and the heads are Edelbrock Performer heads. Aside from that, we ran an Edelbrock carburetor on it for a little bit. Just wanted to have it was a reliable carb that we'd run on the 330, and we wanted to throw it on there for the sake of firing it up, breaking in the cam, just to eliminate any carb issues as a variable, because we knew it was a solid running carb. It was reliable. Didn't give you the most power, but we weren't really fighting with it, so we decided to put it on there. And after a while, wanted to change it up, so we moved away from the Edelbrock carb. We put a quadrijet on it, which is cool. You don't really see too many modified 455s running a quadrijet, so we thought it'd be fun to do. So put it on there, rebuilt it, ran pretty good. It was a little lean to idle, and yeah, it was a pretty good setup. We ended up having a failure with it eventually, which was my own fault. It had blown a head gasket just when I was out on a cruise, and it had overheated. It didn't get super hot, but it did get up to about 240, 250, so I was a little concerned. And we were actually doing a dyno day with the car club I was involved with at the time, and it was having a little bit of blow by. It was probably spring of 2018 at this point, and I didn't really think much of it. So we brought it to the dyno, and when we were making our pulls, there was excessive blow by and deceleration. So it'd go through, it'd do its dyno pull fine, but as soon as you let off the gas, it would just blow a bunch of smoke out of the breather and the tailpipes, and I'll put a video in, of that now. wrong with the engine. So we wanted to rip it out of the car, go through it and see what happened. And we ended up finding, I believe it was the number 1 cylinder, the piston was cracked. And the machine shop thinks that it had expanded too much when it was running, and it overheated, and then it started scraped into the walls of the cylinder, and around that point it most likely cracked. So we were having excessive blow by through that piston. So at that point it was time for another rebuild to go back through it, which is ultimately my fault. It was on me for not paying close enough attention to the gauge and realizing it was overheating and picking up some of the warning signs that there might have been a head gasket down. So once we accepted that, just started going back through it again. Nothing really changed too much with the setup. We did at this point swap over to a new crank. It was an Eagle cast crank and Eagle cast rods. Same SRP pistons, but we brought the engine over another 10 thousandths to 40 over, which brings it to what it is now, which is 463. Same cam, same head, same intake, all that stuff. And that's really where the engine's been. We ended up switching the car over to fuel injection in 2019, a Holley Sniper kit, which I'll probably make a video of my experiences on at some point soon. It's been pretty good once we worked out the bugs. Great throttle response, great startup, things like that. The engine itself has been running good. It's very temperamental down low, which I don't think a lot of people talk about. Once you start putting big cams in engines, you know, it sounds cool and it runs good in the mid to upper RPM range, but down low they're very finicky. When this thing's cold and it's down in the lower RPM range, it's not super happy. So just something to consider when you're putting together an engine like this, especially when you're considering streetability. Engine, as far as running hot, never really had too many crazy issues. They like to run around 190, 200 when we had just a single electric fan on a Be-Cool radiator. So we decided to upgrade to a dual fan setup with a shroud, and since we've done that, it's been running in the about 180, 185 no matter what temperature it is. It doesn't matter if it's in traffic, whatever. Stays nice and cool, runs great. Never really have to worry about any overheating issues. As far as recent changes to the engine, we changed the belt setup to a CVF Racing serpentine kit. We had some belt issues during a test session. We were throwing belts even on the street. If you get on it at all, it would throw belts at higher RPMs and belts would slip, and there was a bunch of alignment issues. So instead of trying to fight with the V-belt system, we decided to just ditch it and go over to a full serpentine system, so that way we didn't have to worry about anything. And there are a few added benefits too, like you get access to a little better alternator selection. You get the GM Type 2 power steering pump, which is awesome. And yeah, then you get good tension. You don't have to worry about, you know, tightening individual belts or tossing belts anymore. Yeah. So as far as this winter, like I had outlined in my previous video that I made, we just went through, we found a collapsed lifter at the end of the year. We noticed excessive ticking, so we wanted to go through the valve train, make sure everything was good there. Found one that was collapsed, so we did a new set. I believe they're Howard's lifters. We're going to need to break in when we start the engine up, which I'll make a video of when we do. Did the intake gaskets, valve cover gaskets, I'll do header gaskets when it goes back together. The new oil pan we did too with the new pickup. Aside from that, it's been a good setup. We haven't had too much of a chance to beat on it. I don't really drive it hard on the street at all. This year, once we start running at events, we'll see how it holds up, especially on full track stuff. We've done, like I said, a few shakedown sessions of autocross runs and stuff, and it's held great. But we want to see how it does once you start getting up to running full track stuff where you're full throttle for 30, 40 seconds at a clip repeatedly, and you're in the heat, you know, sometimes you're in traffic, stuff like that. So that'll really be the big torture test to see where we're at and see how durable it is. I don't really have any plans to make any major changes to the setup, maybe a roller cam in the future, but this cam's been awesome so far. So unless something happens with it, I don't plan on changing it. Don't really plan on going to an LS anytime soon. I mean, never say never. If something were to happen to this engine, I guess it would be something I would consider. But I've always liked the idea of keeping it Oldsmobile powered, especially if it can be competitive at these events that we plan on running at. You don't really need 1 million horsepower to be fast on a road course. So as far as the power that this engine makes, when we had it on the dyno session, when it had the cracked piston, it made 325 at the rear wheels and 450 pound-feet of torque, I believe. Or it might be backwards. I think it was 350, 425 through a TH400. I'm hoping to get this back on the dyno soon once this setup's together. I don't anticipate crazy gains over what it was. I know everybody builds a 455 and thinks it's instantly 500 horsepower, but that's not always the case. So I'm not really going to set any expectations for what I think it's going to make. I just want to throw it on the dyno, see where it's at, and go from there. So. That's really the engine setup. As far as the transmissions go that have been in the car, we had the original TH350 in for maybe a few months when we had the 350 in the car. Swapped that out, put in a 204R, which was good. We got from a family friend of ours. And behind the 330, that was awesome. It was really nice to have the overdrive, and we never even fully locked out the converter, so we didn't even get the full benefit of that. But that was great. Once we put the 455 in, we left the 204R in for a little bit, but even under half throttle, it started slipping. So we realized we were going to kill the transmission if we left it in there any longer. So we swapped out the TH100 from my dad's car, just as a sort of temporary trans to get it going. And now we're putting in the T56, which was always the long-term goal and sort of the end game for what we wanted to do with the transmission. So, yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask below. If you have any questions about the setup, my experience with certain parts, any recommendation, things like that, feel free to leave a comment. So, thank you.